They're Britain's most infamous serial killer couple.
The disappearance of so many children created an atmosphere of fear and panic.
In the mid-1960s, Britain was convulsed by the abduction and murder of 5 children in Greater Manchester. Their killers, now both dead.
I just hope they suffered like my sister suffered.
But their dark legacy lives on in those they attempted to abduct, but who survived.
If I hadn't have gone out that window, I wouldn't be sitting talking to you now.
That was the day my childhood was over.
And it lives on in the relatives of their victims.
Even though them two are dead, not for us, has it? It'll never stop.
Now, they're meeting to see if they can lay the past to rest.
I should have been with her. Wouldn't have happened if I'd have been with her.
Terry, don't you blame yourself, kid.
Manchester, July the 12th, 1963. 16-year-old Pauline Reed set out on the 10-minute walk from home to a dance at a local social club. But she never arrived, as she never returned home. Just 4 months after Pauline Reed disappeared, another young victim was targeted.
This is a photograph of my first Holy Communion. I was 7 years of age.
A latchkey kid, Tommy Rattigan, spent the day begging for money or stealing whatever he could on the streets of Manchester. He remembers every detail of what happened to him in a playground one afternoon 53 years ago.
I mean, this was in November time. It would have been roughly around about 4:30, and the light started to go. And then I can recall there's a man and woman there lighting up the cigarettes. I can always remember her stopping, and she sort of turned her head to one side. There was this coyness about her, this coy look and a smile. And I smiled back at her, and we got into a conversation. Why was I here on my own? Was I not afraid of the dark? I told her my name was Tommy. And she asked me how old I was, and I told her I was 7. And she came closer to me. I can remember, I can still smell now, you know, the perfume, a very, very strong smell of perfume and hairspray. And her eyes, she had these blue eyes. They looked really, really kind. And she spoke really kindly. And so I felt really, really comfortable with her. The man that was standing over there smoking, he was sort of looking backwards and forwards and everywhere. He's just waiting. And he said something on the lines of, hurry up. And so she just says to me, are you hungry? You look hungry. And I says, yeah. And she says, well, come on then. Do you want to come back for a jam butty? And we get you off home. And I says, yeah. And she held onto the swing, and I slid off the swing, and then she turned and just told me, come on.
Tommy had no idea he was in any kind of peril, but just 1 week following his meeting with the mysterious couple, 4 miles away, another child went missing, 12-year-old John Kilbride.
This is the market where John went missing from, and just down here it was, just round the corner. He was a nice lad. John used to give me piggybacks upstairs to bed and things like that, you know, and always whistling that tune to Z Cars.
On November the 23rd, 1963, early in the afternoon, John went out to earn money for the family, as he often did, by helping the market traders pack up their stalls. But he didn't come home for his tea.
I could see my mother in there. I could see her starting getting worried. He should have been back round about 5 o'clock. Everybody were out, all the neighbours, everybody was out, wondering where he was, and he just didn't come home. And he got round about 8:30, 9 o'clock, and she rang the police, my mum. The police coming in the house, the detectives, and the police doctor, what came in, took us back into the back kitchen, one at a time, and stripped us off and had a good look at us and asked if anybody had touched us and this, that and the other, because we were obviously thinking it was my dad.
But Terry's dad had nothing to do with it. John Kilbride was the second child to vanish.
We're all in, we've got washed and changed, had a bit of supper and that, and we're up to bed. But you know what kids are like, earwigging and that, like they do at top of the stairs and things, and we were just worried, and we're up and looking through the window all night, wondering where he is, and yeah, it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible.
Children were going missing and police had no idea what was going on. They scoured wastelands, dredged canals and carried out thousands of door-to-door inquiries and distributed leaflets and posters all over Manchester. It was as if they'd vanished into thin air.
It was distressing for the whole community. We had no lead whatever as to what might have happened to these children. It was very, very heartbreaking to be living in that area at the time.
Manchester, which had been a place of innocence, was changed by the disappearance of the children. It started to cast a shadow. People started to worry about what was going on.
7-year-old Tommy Rattigan had no idea he was in serious danger as he followed the woman with the kind eyes and the blonde beehive away from the playground.
Now and again, the woman would look behind, and we'd walk down, and by the time I got to the end, she was already at a house. And that's when this man that had been following before, that was with her, he just suddenly appeared. I looked up into his face, and he had blue eyes, and I can remember looking at his eyes, and they seemed all right, you know, a bit sullen, I suppose. He seemed a bit more serious than what she did. I stood for a moment as he closed the front door, and then I followed the woman into the back room.
In the house, the mood changed.
And she went into the kitchen, and I recall just hearing muffled sounds, voices talking. Then she came back out and she put the slice of bread and jam. It banged onto the table. And she'd completely changed. Her eyes had completely changed. That smile wasn't there. The smile that she showed before just wasn't there. She just asked me what was wrong, and I said, "Can I have some water?" And she went and got me water, went back into the kitchen, and that's when I heard her say something to him, and he snapped at her. "Fucking wait." But it was a really sort of quite angry. And it was at that stage that I just wanted to go. I don't know why I didn't run for the front door, because I could have just easily run to the front door. But the nearest point for me, the quickest escape for me, was the window. And I can remember quickly getting up and undoing the latch and lifting it up, and it coming up to about 4 inches and not going any further. I was panicking so much that I felt physically sick.
In 1961, 18-year-old Myra Hindley took a job as a typist at a chemical distribution company, which is where she met 23-year-old Ian Brady. She soon became obsessed with the intense young man who drove a motorcycle and had already had several brushes with the law. Duncan Staff, who received all of Hindley's private papers on her death, has written extensively about the Moors murderers.
Ian Brady and Myra Hindley had constructed what they viewed as a world above. They saw themselves as separated from their families, from the communities around them, and they saw themselves as better. But they needed something to validate this world, and Brady came up with the idea of the perfect murder.
For this, Brady needed the perfect accomplice, and he found it in the willing Hindley. So far, their plan was working. They had abducted 2 children and left no clues, but there were others who escaped their clutches. 7-year-old Tommy Rattigan knew instinctively there was something wrong with the couple who had invited him home for bread and jam.
I can remember jumping straight out of the window and I'm tangled up in part of the net curtain. Suddenly, as I'm going, I can hear the woman shout, "The little shit's getting away." She's grabbed for my foot, but she's caught the ankle, and my momentum has kept me going. And as I'm going, I heard a male voice of the man saying, "The bastard," you know, and I was over that wall, and I was gone. If I hadn't have gone out that window, I wouldn't be sitting talking to you now. I know that for sure.
Tommy escaped, but for the families of those who didn't, Pauline Reed and John Kilbride, the suffering continued. 12-year-old John had now been missing for 6 months. Younger brother Terry remembers the strain his parents were under.
To see my mum and my dad go the way they went from that night, the worry on my mother's face and my dad, he was just quite crazy, my dad. He started eating the drink very heavy and the house just went dead.
Well, it was utterly devastating for John Kilbride's family. They were torn apart by it. And it's a very uncomfortable fact that Brady and Hindley were enjoying that pain and even went back and sat outside the house on a motorcycle and watched the family coming and going, knowing that they had killed John.
It was very, very hard not knowing whether he was dead or alive. Every day, every night, stood at the window, stood looking through windows, opening. This one is in the back garden where we was brought up. That's me there in the corner and our John in the middle. To go from that, where everybody's happy and jolly, and then it goes to that. We're all having a meal there, and John is missing from where he should be. And that chair wasn't sat on at that table for 2 years till John was found.
Little did the Kilbride family know, but John had been taken to Saddleworth Moor and killed and buried there on the same night he was abducted.
You can see all the moors, no matter where you are in here, you can see all the moors. So you're never away from it, you know.
Pauline Reed and John Kilbride had disappeared, and when on June 16, 1964, a third child, Keith Bennett, went missing, panic set in. Parents became scared to let their children out of their sight.
Fear of the unknown started to creep in as people were wondering what was going on. No one knew the answer, but they did know there was a threat out there.
And still, the police had no leads. Evan Hughes, then a detective constable in the Cheshire Police Force, has never before spoken about the part he played during the search for the missing children.
There was a massive search on with 4 or 5 different police forces involved. Didn't matter where you went in that area, you would see one of these posters with a missing child. If you went to the open market in Ashton-under-Lyne, where John Kilbride disappeared from, you would see posters everywhere. It was very, very heartbreaking.
3 children missing, and still Brady and Hindley weren't done.
The forces that propelled Ian Brady to want to commit the perfect murder were still present. It was always going to happen again. And what they did was they killed roughly every 6 months. Ian Brady needed to carry on killing.
On December 26th, Brady and Hindley went searching for their next victim at the fairground that came round every Christmas. Bernard King, was just 10 years old. He's never previously spoken on television about what happened at the fair that day.
This is what we used to call the Red Wreck, where we used to have the fair every year. All the side stalls were along the main road there, with the slot machines, the dodgems. Over there, towards that tree, was where the waltzer was.
Also going to the fair that afternoon was 10-year-old Leslie Ann Downey. Her brother Terry was 2 years older. He has also never previously spoken about what happened. Terry was going to take his little sister to the fair that day, but fell ill.
I said, if I feel any better, later on, I'll take you to the fair. But as the day went on, I just got worse, you know, and it was sniffling and sneezing and what have you, you know. I said, oh, won't be able to take that to my mum. She said, no, I realise that. She said, I'll get one of the neighbours to take her.
So it's around here where the waltzer was. Use your imagination. The stairs used to come up here, or the hereabouts. Waltzer was probably this high, so I was stood up there.
Leslie became separated from the neighbours and was standing by the waltzer, close to where Bernard was.
I knew of Leslie. I used to see her at school. Nice-looking girl, very quiet, not rowdy.
They were watching the cars flash past them as a man and woman laden with shopping bags approached them. The woman struck up a conversation, not with Bernard, but with Leslie.
And I was stood on top of near the rail on top of the waltzer, and Brady and Hindley were here with Leslie.
Myra dropped her shopping on the floor, quite deliberately, and got Leslie to help her pick it up.
When I first looked, they were looking into a shopping bag.
Myra drew the little girl in. She was very good at this. She had a very powerful personality, she was persuasive, and the little girl trusted her.
Hindley looked up at me and then turned round, and then Brady just gave me a bit of a glance. They picked up the shopping bag. Hindley grabbed Leslie's right hand, and they went off in that direction towards what used to be the toilets, where those trees are.
Leslie was due back by 5 o'clock, but as the day wore on and darkness fell, there was no sign of her.
I was just completely numb, wondering, it's not like her, she'd be back on time. I just couldn't get my head round it, why she weren't back. My mum started panicking, obviously. She went with my stepdad to go and look for her on the fair. Obviously, when they come in, I said she's not come back, you know, to my mum. She said she's nowhere to be seen. You know, it was just a look on her face, anxious. Where is she? Where is she? Like all of us had been. By that time, she knew. Obviously, something had happened, but what? Obviously, we didn't know. We didn't know. You know, whether someone had took her or what happened. She'd had an accident. It could have been anything. We just didn't know.
4 children missing now. 4 children vanished from Manchester's streets.
The disappearance of so many children created an atmosphere of fear and panic. Nobody knew what was going on, but they knew that something was going wrong, and somebody had to be taking these children. There was no other explanation. They don't just vanish into thin air. But nobody really knew, and nobody could quite believe that it was happening.
I was upset. I should have been with her, you know. You know, it wouldn't have happened if I'd have been with her. I know it wouldn't have done.
In hindsight, you know, you wish you could have done more, but I saw what I saw. I didn't think anything about it, and then I made my way home and got a good hiding for going to the fair on my own.
I was just saying, well, it's going to be all right. Nobody's going to hurt her. I remember, saying that to my mum. Nobody will hurt her. Little did we know, what had happened at the back of us, up on the moors.
On the first day back at school, Bernard's headmaster brought 2 men into assembly to speak to the children.
The headmaster said, we have some policemen here who'd like to speak to you. Was anybody on the fair on Boxing Day afternoon, evening? Obviously, I put my hand up. They then asked, did anybody see Leslie on the fair? And I just, because I'd seen her, I kept my hand up. Where was she? I said she was with a man and a woman, and she walked away with them. I thought she knew him because they weren't dragging her, let's put it that way. She seemed to go quite willingly. They asked me to describe the people, and I described the woman as wearing a scarf with blonde hair and dark eyes. She had a lot of makeup on, and he had greasy hair all brushed back.
Though Bernard had given the police a description of Brady and Hindley, they appeared no closer to catching the murderous couple, leaving them free to prey upon the children of Manchester. A 10-year-old boy browsing in a sweet shop was about to become their next victim.
And that was the day my childhood was over.
By early 1965, 4 children had gone missing from the streets of Greater Manchester. No one knew it then, but they'd all been murdered and buried high on the moors. For Ian Brady and Myra Hindley, these killings were not spur of the moment.
Ian Brady was very, very planned. He was very forensically aware. So he worked out exactly how they were going to pick up a child, where they would take that young person and where they would kill them and how they would kill them. Everything was carefully planned out and thought through. And after the victim had died, he and Myra Hindley went home and they cleared up everything. They counted the buttons on their clothes. They washed everything down methodically. Everything was carefully worked out.
This is why the Moors murderers were so hard to catch. And they were not yet done with killing. As a 10-year-old, former Anglican priest David Gray used to earn money for his mother by delivering coal round the streets near his home. He's telling his story here for the first time.
I was doing a coal round during the school holidays. I'd counted up my tips, and it was 14 shillings and sixpence. 14 shillings was for me mother, and I had sixpence I could spend all on me. Over half a century ago, this was a little sweet shop. I stepped into the shop thinking I could buy anything with that sixpence. And I was just lost in thought. The shopkeeper was talking to an elderly lady. And she just mentioned that there was a guy looking at my barrow outside the shop.
David didn't know who the man looking at his coal barrow was, but he would later come to believe it was Ian Brady.
He wore a suit, white shirt, open collar, dark hair. He looked almost like a typical pop singer of the day. This guy was about here. I had no idea who he was. There was a car parked at the curb, and there was someone in the car. And he turns and says, "We're police officers and we're investigating meter robberies." And he'd heard the money in my pocket jangle. And he said, "We have reason to believe that you can help us with our inquiries and we want you to come to the police station with us." I asked him to show me a warrant card. He told me, "You watch too much telly, sonny." And I must have stepped back because I'd nudged the door and the shop doorbell jangled. And the driver of the car said, "Come on, Ian, we've got to go." And the guy just casually stepped towards the car, got in the car, and they drove off. And I was stood there for a long time, afraid to move. I would just not remember being, for the next few days, really afraid.
4 children disappeared already. If David had climbed into the car, he would very likely have become the 5th. Victim number 5 came soon after. Brady met 17-year-old Edward Evans at the Buffy bar at Central Station in Manchester and invited him home for a drink, where he said he lived with his sister, Myra.
From Edward Evans' point of view, things started to go wrong pretty soon. Ian Brady had obviously planned what he was going to do. He got an axe and he hit Edward Evans with it. He hit him repeatedly. He didn't die instantly. It was appalling and very bloody. And Myra Hindley stood on and watched as this happened.
The murderers then asked Hindley's brother-in-law round to help clear up the mess, banking on him staying quiet.
This involving a stranger in the killing, in the clearing up, even if he was a relative and they thought he was on site, was a terrible mistake, because of course the following day, David Smith, terrified, rang the police and told them what had happened.
Armed with the information supplied by Smith, the police found Evans' trussed-up body in an upstairs bedroom, and Brady was arrested for his murder. Edward Evans was the Moors murderer's final victim. Evan Hughes was given the job of breaking the news of her son's death to Mrs. Evans.
Now that was a difficult task. I stood outside the door and I did pause a while because I had to think very carefully, what am I going to say to his mother? And I remember very well walking along, and Edward's mother was sitting in a chair surrounded by other neighbours. Obviously, she was expecting, I think, she was expecting bad news. And I told her, in fact, that her son had been killed and that I had to take her to the mortuary where she would identify the body of her son. I just felt completely sorry for the old lady.
4 days after Brady was arrested, Hindley was too, and charged as accessory to murder.
I think that's the first time I'd ever heard them names. Used to pick a paper up, it was Brady only. It was never out of the press.
For Tommy Rattigan, who'd escaped the clutches of the mysterious couple 2 years before, the penny dropped when he saw Brady and Hindley on TV.
There was a big story about Myra Hindley and Ian Brady. And it was the faces that I recognised straight away. I had no doubt about that straight away. And I can remember turning around to the teacher and saying, "Sir, I've been to their house." And he sort of looked at me and he said, "Yeah, and I bet you they sent you away with a lucky bag."
The paper came through the letterbox. And as I opened the paper up, it began to sink in what he'd intended to do to me. He'd killed children. I always think of that moment when I picked the paper up and my childhood ended.
Police began to find alarming evidence that there were other possible victims, and they may be dealing with serial killers. They found photos of Saddleworth Moor taken by Brady and Hindley, and then photos of missing Leslie Ann Downey, and concluded her body was probably buried on the moor.
They took photographs of locations before children were killed. Then he took photographs when they'd been murdered, and he took photographs afterwards. When they held a photo slideshow, those pictures were of locations on the moorland. Well, It doesn't take a lot of working out to know what was going on there. They were reliving and enjoying what they'd done.
Evan Hughes was present when the first human remains were found.
It was very distressing. It was cold and bitter. But one thing I remember in particular was a detective inspector from Ashton-under-Lyne. He was standing next to me. And one of the first things he said to me, I recognise that clothing. That clothing is definitely little Leslie's clothing. In this photograph here, we've got police officers guarding the grave of little Leslie Ann Downey on Saddleworth Moor. I'm the second one from the left-hand side of the picture. Obviously, this inspector had very, very close relationship with the family of Leslie Ann Downey at the time. I could see tears in this man's eyes.
When they actually did find Les, I just remember that was the worst nightmare.
As a kid, I don't think you grasp, what was going on, the murders and taking them up to the moors and burying them on the moors. It was horrible. There for the grace of God go I, it could have been me. Really nice girl, just massive shame.
My mum, obviously, she had to go and identify her. And she come home, I was sat on the stairs. And she just come in and I just said, is it Leslie? And she just said, yeah. And that was it. I'd just gone to pieces. I'll never to have our Leslie back.
Spoke to my mum about it and said, Mum, I wonder if our John's with Leslie. And she just used to say, he'll be coming home in a bit. That was the hope.
Following the discovery of Leslie Ann Downey on Saddleworth Moor, police intensified their search. Soon, another body was found.
It was 12 days after, and they brought a shoe to the house. And it was the winkle picture of John's. And they told us in front room, all of us together, that they'd found John, and my mum would just start breaking her heart. And my dad with temper. It was just anger and temper, my dad.
The grief suffered by the families of the victims of the Moors murders is appalling. What you see is this open, raw pain that never goes away. It's a trauma that can never be dealt with. It's a level of suffering that's almost unimaginable.
The whole family was just devastated. It just wrecked our lives. Just totally. Wrecked mine, without a doubt. Wrecked my mum's. I've never been the same. Even all them years ago, and it's still affecting me now.
But even that photograph, that haunting photograph, what stays in your mind of them both. Oh, it was on the news all the time. We were on TV. It was plastered everywhere, that picture of them.
For those families who suffered at the hands of Britain's most notorious serial killers, the pain continues. Whether they narrowly escaped with their lives or lost loved ones.
It's ongoing. No matter what, it's ongoing. It'll go on generations.
After 50 years of suffering and guilt, those whose lives were changed forever by the horrific murders committed by Brady and Hindley are coming together.
Yeah, of course you can, yeah.
No problem.
To share their experiences and to try and heal.
Terry, don't you blame yourself, kid.
On April the 19th, 1966, Ian Brady and Myra Hindley went on trial for the murders of 3 children, Leslie Ann Downey, John Kilbride and Edward Evans. The bodies of Pauline Reed and Keith Bennett had not been found. Attending the trial was Bernard King, who had seen Leslie Ann Downey's abduction. At just 12 years old, he was a key witness for the prosecution.
I came into the court, my mum was sat at the side when they asked me the question, are the 2 people that were on the fair with Leslie that evening in this court? And I said, yeah, they sat over there. And then Myra Hindley just looked at me. It was a stare, and I could feel my bottom lip going. And then, well, luckily for me, after that, he just said, right, no more questions, and I left the court.
Myra Hindley was still utterly besotted with Ian Brady, and they were arrogant. They thought they were better than everyone around them, better than the lawyers, better than the family sitting beneath them.
At the summing up, the judge called Brady and Hindley 2 sadistic killers of utmost depravity and sentenced them both to life. Brady and Hindley changed forever the lives of those who they attempted to abduct and the relatives of those they murdered.
Okay. Yeah. Nice to meet you as well.
Now they're meeting for the first time.
Terry, don't you blame yourself,
No,
kid.
you can't do that. I mean,
No, I
Don't
know,
you
but
ever
it's
blame
in
yourself?
there.
It-
It's going to stay there
Yeah.
until
I hear
I've
you.
gone.
why are you actually blaming yourself?
The only reason is of all days for me to have been poorly. You know, I had
Yeah.
like the flu.
Terry had taken Leslie that day to the fairground, and he's blamed himself.
And I always
these
will do.
years,
Yeah.
He's blamed himself.
It's not your fault,
And
pal.
I've told him, I'm told.
You know, in the military they call it survivor syndrome.
Something you just can't get over. Such a little angel, how anyone could hurt her. How beautiful she is. Just like a porcelain doll. Lovely, lovely, lovely girl. And pain in her eyes.
Terry's mother died in 1999.
Full of sadness.
Now he is Leslie Ann Downey's last surviving sibling.
This particular one, photographing my mum and my brothers, none of us are smiling. Just, it's what's happened to us in the family, got to all of us.
The way I look at it is, them 2 robbed you of nieces, nephews.
Yep.
They robbed you of you going to your sister's wedding.
John was the oldest of the 4 Kilbride brothers. Terry was the youngest.
This photograph, all dressed up. John, Danny, me, and Patrick. It's really, really hurting that to go back to that. It's just not right, is it? For them 2 to do what they did. Many a time, I wonder if John would have been coming to Old Trafford with me and would we have been doing this together? What would he have been? What could he have been? What would he be working at? I thought she was the worst of the 2, for it to be a woman.
It's an uncomfortable fact that the Moors murderers were so good at luring children away because one of them was a woman.
She's there and she's smiling at me, and she had a lovely smile, I would never have gone into a house with a man on his own.
Yeah.
But a woman was different. It was easy for her to sort of
somebody's
talk
trust.
to children.
You was always told off your parents, beware of strange men.
Yeah.
It was men, yeah,
Not women.
In 1987, the story of the Moors murderers took a dramatic turn when Myra Hindley told police she could help pinpoint the locations where the bodies of Keith Bennett and Pauline Reed were buried. Amid a media circus, she made 2 visits to Saddleworth Moor. Her clues eventually led investigators to Pauline's remains. But to this day, the location of 12-year-old Keith Bennett is still a mystery. Keith's mother, Winnie, pleaded with Brady and Hindley to tell her where her son was buried, but they refused.
I used to get really emotional to think that you have a woman that is begging, not for the life of her child back, not to see her child back, but to beg for the body back.
To put him somewhere where she can visit.
Don't you think he used that as a bit of a
It
lever?
was his ace card.
It was the ace up his sleeve all the time, wasn't it?
Ian Brady clearly was evil, but there was a mad logic to his evil. He knew what he was doing, and he knew that to the moment that he died. So not giving up the location of Keith Bennett's grave, for him, it gave him power, it gave him control, and it was the same control that he felt when he carried out the murders. It lifted him above. So what's going on in Ian Brady's head right to the end was, I know, you don't know, you want to know, and I'm not going to tell you.
Tommy Rattigan wrote to Brady in prison, reminded him of their encounter in a Manchester park over 50 years ago, and asked him to finally reveal Keith's burial place.
Dear Mr. Rattigan, I read your letter of March. I'm afraid you are mistaken in believing you encountered us in the past. I've had dozens of letters from people mistaken in this belief. The peculiar thing is, of all the strangers we have met on our many travels, not one remembers, or if they do, have dismissed the idea as too fantastic, as we were quite ordinary and not dripping blood. Nothing about Keith, nothing at all.
Myra Hindley died in prison in 2002, aged 60. Ian Brady died in 2017, aged 79.
I know you wanted him dead, didn't you?
Day in, day out.
Hang him.
Hanging's too good for him.
Put him on, say, Ashton Markey and let all the mothers have a go.
What happened when you found out that he died? What was your emotions on that?
My emotions were to my wife, go and get a glass of wine and bring it in here, and I don't drink at home.
They say he died and they were waiting to bury him and just throw him outside and let him rot.
I said that.
That's how I felt.
Even though them two are dead, not for us, has it? It'll never stop. It'll never ever stop for our family.
I'm the only one left now. Something I can't escape. You mention the Moors, and that's it. People know. It's one thing that will never die.
Thank you.